Our 1981 Mexican adventure began with a flight from Gatwick to Houston, a town that we didn't find terribly interesting. But the following morning we boarded a Trailways bus for a 4-hour journey which took us to San Antonio, which the locals of course call San Antone. After a quick stroll past the Alamo, you remember the Alamo, don't you? We encountered a mariachi band playing in the main plaza. There was an old man, 101 years old or so he said, who danced with his wife. He even threw down his hat and tried to dance round it, but his wife scooped it up and they danced on. In the evening we found a lovely little riverside walk with beautiful little cafes and restaurants. Next morning we moved on to the town of Nuevo Laredo, where the Rio Grande marks the border between the USA and Mexico. On the southern side of the river we boarded the Aztec Eagle, the train which whisked us all the way to Mexico City. The journey, covering about 700 miles, took about 24 hours. We spent the night sleeping comfortably in the alcoba, or sleeping compartment, and woke the next sunny morning to find ourselves in what appeared to be a village, except that all of the homes were old railway carriages, which the residents decorated delicately with flowers in pots to make them a bit more attractive. We really have little understanding in our safe European homes of exactly how much of the rest of the world has to live. On Saturday the 19th of September, we rose early, breakfasted and went for a day-long walk through Mexico City. There seemed to be craft markets wherever we went, and every street or alley that we walked through was soundtracked by a strolling mariachi band who serenaded anyone they could find who was willing to listen. It was an extraordinary melange of noise. Violins, trumpets, accordions, drums, double basses, guitars, voices and harps, all mingled with each other in the heat of the Mexican afternoon. One of the most interesting places we visited was a huge indoor food market on the Plaza San Juan. The stallholders were more than pleased to be photographed and struck up poses at will until it began to look as though we would never escape until we'd photographed everybody and his bike. The stalls sold everything from exotic vegetables and fruit, including pomegranates and watermelon, delicious. There was fish, huge whole redfish, lobsters, crabs, shrimp, and much more that we didn't even recognise. The meat, some of which looked suspiciously like skinned greyhounds, included rabbits, live snails by the tubful. There were things that looked like pork crackling. There were quail's eggs, cheeses of diverse sorts, and so much more that the memory fails to recall them all. Mexico City by night was ever so slightly cooler than Mexico City by day in the glare of the sunshine, but it was no less busy. There was activity everywhere. In the Plaza San Domingo, we found open-air printing machines working ceaselessly, churning out business cards, menus and other essential but simple printing tasks. Here too there were public scribes with typewriters for hire. A cocktail in the rooftop lounge of the majestic hotel preceded our visit to a vast underground restaurant in a cavern where bats flew overhead as we dined. We were up early the next morning for our visit to the pyramids at Teotihuacan, just outside Mexico City. For much of the time, to our surprise, we were almost entirely alone, but when we ascended to the top of one of the pyramids, we were surrounded by a swarm of Japanese tourists. Every one of them carried a camera, and every one of them insisted on being photographed with us, because we were white and tall. Carol noted in our diary that although even the biggest of the Mexican pyramids is only half as tall as the Egyptian pyramids, we were still left breathless by the sight of them. And for some reason which we never quite understood, we were followed wherever we went by the most beautiful American film starlet. The next leg of our Mexican adventure was a drive from Mexico City to Oaxaca, which is actually pronounced Oaxaca. It was a beautiful, lazy little town and we should have stayed longer, but we had to press on. From Oaxaca, our trusty little Volkswagen took us to Palenque. It's a site built in 690 AD, and it's right in the middle of the jungle down the end of a dirt track. Palenque is unspoiled and feels so ancient that the tourist seems little more than an irritant, a short-lived insect crawling over its ageless and mysterious surfaces. When an unexpected tropical storm drenched the site, we took refuge at the top of a pyramid, and when Carol looked up at the ceiling, it was covered in butterflies, also hiding from the storm. From Palenque we headed northeast to Uxmal, and for much of that trip we were travelling along jungle dirt roads. But even the humblest shacks often seem to have motorbikes and Coca-Cola machines outside. It was on the way to the Hacienda Uxmal that we stopped the car because we spotted big black things that we thought were frogs crossing the road. They turned out to be tarantulas. The staff in the Hacienda Uxmal were not at all impressed. Just watch out in the morning, they told us, when you put your shoes on. That's where they like to sleep. The next day, by an incredible coincidence, Carol heard a voice across the pool. "I'm sure I know that voice," she said. And so she did. It turned out to belong to Ian Duncan, the brother of her former boyfriend Pete Duncan. Our reason for visiting Uxmal was yet another set of fantastic ruins, populated for the most part by gorgeous green lizards. On Wednesday, September the 30th, my birthday as it happened, we visited the ruins. We spent 3 hours soaking in the atmosphere of this extraordinary place. We wandered round the Temple of the Magician, the Nunnery, and the Pyramid of the Dwarf. Some of the carving at Uxmal is better preserved than anywhere else in Mexico. And there was a feeling of being in a place where a great civilization centuries old had been wiped out. After returning to the hotel briefly in the afternoon, we came back to the ruins in the evening to see the Son et Lumière presentation, which was excellent with a great sound system and very pleasing use of lights on the various ruins. The following day, we said farewell to Ian and Jane Duncan and their families and headed off towards Chichen Itza. At Chichen Itza, we located ourselves in the Villa Archeologica, a hotel of Nordic cleanliness. We sat that evening sipping pina coladas served up in a real pineapple and watching hordes of ants struggling to drag a piece of chicken up to their nest. The view from the top of the Castillo of a jungle dotted with ruins was spectacular, and by going round to the back we were treated to a view over the Temple of the Thousand Columns. Then another huge downpour began, and as we were walking back from the sacred Senate, where they used to sacrifice virgins to the rain god, it became torrential, and, soaking wet, we ran to the base of the Castillo, where we found shelter in an opening in the side of the steep steps. On the morning of Saturday, October the 3rd, we returned to the site of the ruins to see the Wall of Skulls and take a better look at the group of 1,000 columns. Wandering amongst them felt strange because they obviously once supported a roof, which is now gone. We also disturbed several large iguanas which we passed basking in the sun. They didn't pay a lot of attention to us and merely snuck back inside the holes in the wall where they lived. On our drive from Chichen to Tulum, we passed a local bull ring with a lonely looking bull in the middle. Once again, as we were driving along a dirt road towards Tulum, the heavens opened. When the rain finally abated, the track was unpassable, so watched by a local cow and her calf, I had to dig a trench to drain the huge puddle which was blocking our way. Tulum turned out to be probably the most ramshackle, unrestored site we visited. Not too exciting in its architecture, but magnificently located on a cliff top in a grove of trees looking out over the Caribbean breakers. It was also crawling with more lizards than we've ever seen, plus a truly huge butterfly, iridescent blue. Still more or less hugging the coastline, we travelled on to Isla Mujeres. This turned out to be every Westerner's vision of a tropical paradise. It even tempted me to pretend to swim. Our final marathon drive across central Mexico took us to the town of Catemaco, a fishing town which sits by the laguna which bears the same name as the town. As we rounded a hilltop, the town, the lake and the golden dome of its church came into view all at once. We decided we were going to have to stop for the night. A walk along the lakeside meant that we met an excellent local mariachi band, a white cat, several lovely children and their families, a wild animal of some sort tied up at a restaurant table, a huge tree full of long-legged white birds, women washing their clothes in the lake, fishermen pulling up their boats, and sunset from our lakeside cafe. Our next stop would be Los Angeles.